Thank you. I'm here from Partisia Blockchain, and I'm going to be talking about how you can do the Partisia Blockchain as a platform to do good in this world. So, first I'll do a little presentation of myself. Partisia Blockchain is, like any blockchain, a distributed database. And what makes a distributed database smart is that you have the same information distributed on multiple servers, so you need to corrupt many servers to compromise the data that's being stored. So it's a much safer way of retaining information. What makes Partisia Blockchain special from other blockchains is that it's a privacy-preserving blockchain. So it gives you both the possibility of putting things on a permanent ledger so that that cannot be changed back in time. But at the same time, it allows you to do multi-party computation and zero-knowledge computation, so you can do things that would you can do different kinds of contracts that you wouldn't want to have on a public blockchain. You can do transactions, for example, auctions, where you don't want to disclose information and so on. So that's basically what sets Partisia Blockchain aside from other blockchains. What I'm doing here is, I'm not on the technical side of this, I do something else for the blockchain. I'm going to start out with this small quote by Joseph Campbell, that computers are like Old Testament gods. Lots of rules and no mercy. Now, this analogy is of course not to be taken literally, but I'm going to do so anyway. So if we look at it like this, can I just start over? I think I messed it up, so I'm just going to do it from the beginning. Yeah, it's because I added some unscripted stuff because I wanted to do a little bit different introduction this time, because I just thought we were actually missing some information in the beginning about Partisia Blockchain, so I just improvised that completely, and I just thought that didn't go very well. I'll just do it again. Thank you for coming. I am doing a presentation about how you can make the world a better place using Partisia Blockchain as your platform. So, a blockchain is basically a network of computers. It's a distributed database where multiple servers update the same information so that you don't have one single point of vulnerability, like if you have all your data stored in one location. So that's a basic idea of a public blockchain, is that you have this public ledger that can't be changed back in time, so when a transaction has happened, it's irreversible. And that's very good for a lot of different scenarios where, for example, if you want to prove ownership or other things. But there are scenarios where a public blockchain is not the optimal thing to have. For example, if you want to do an auction, you want to bid on an item, but you don't win the auction, you don't want your financial information to be disclosed on a public ledger that everybody can see, then they can use that information as an advantage against you. What Partisia Blockchain allows you to do as the first blockchain ever is that it's a privacy-preserving blockchain where you can do zero-knowledge computations. And basically this allows you to only put the things on the public blockchain that you want to be there, and at the same time still participate in the marketplace. So, as a presentation of myself, I chose this quote from Joseph Campbell, who was a well-known scholar of ancient myths, and he compared computers to Old Testament gods. Normally you don't take this analogy literally, but I'm going to do so. So if we take this assumption to be true, we can basically say that the best person to make an investigation into the good of the blockchain and its ethical dimension would be some kind of philosophy major or something, which is why I will do this presentation. So the problem I'll be addressing is how you can make the world a better place with Partisia Blockchain as your platform. I'm going to go through Partisia's vision for the future, how we're going to, how you can use it as a platform to establish trust, to facilitate transactions. Then I'm going to talk about the correspondence to the Sustainable Development Goals, some of our successful use cases, and the role of the smart contract in all this. And then I'm going to go through different types of challenges that you can solve using our zero-knowledge smart contracts. This is a fruit stand. It's a very, very common sight if you go to Denmark in the summer. It's unmanned, and if it was not unmanned, it would not be cost effective. The only reason the farmer or the gardener can do this is because that there is an enforcement mechanism here, a cultural enforcement mechanism that means that nobody would steal from the fruit stand, so he doesn't have to be there. And there is a consensus that everybody would pay. So everybody pays, and nobody steals the money, nobody steals the items being sold. And this is basically the image I want to have you to have in your mind, is that you can't have any form of transaction between people unless you have a foundation of trust. But what changes over time and from your cultural setting is the type of enforcement mechanism that's available. So as we see, the historical development is that we basically move through stages of enforcement mechanisms. So the first example I came up with, the fruit stand, that would be a cultural enforcement mechanism. It's commonly understood by all the people who have this cultural norm that it's morally reprehensible to steal from the fruit stand, and it's a necessary condition that you pay for the items. However, as soon as you have a place where there are different cultural norms, this is a very unreliable form of enforcement mechanism. That's why temporal authority, like a state and a legislator, is a much more dependable way of doing it. But just like the cultural enforcement mechanism, there's inherent weaknesses to the state enforcing and basically enforcing the trust behind a given transaction. There can both be an overzealous state that make an overreach of power and control too much, and that limits the market, or there can be market failures, like if there's not enough basically oversight on what goes on in the market, then you can have market failures instead. Where we basically are moving in now is to a time where we are using user data to enforce transactions. We can call this cryptographic enforcement. The inherent weakness in enforcing transactions through our knowledge of data is how do we preserve privacy of these transactions. So that's basically the role of the Partisia blockchain, is that it allows you to provide privacy while still facilitating this cryptographic enforcement of trust. These are the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the Partisia Blockchain as a company is committed to the fulfillment of these goals. When I first started working here 1.5 years ago, I was pretty cynical about the notion that blockchain technology could do anything to solve these very complex real-world issues. But I've actually changed my opinion quite a bit on the matter. One thing to note is that these goals are not independent values. So if you can make an impact on one of these, they scale very well. If you change access to healthcare, it has a huge impact on the economy, on other factors, on the environment. So if you can just make an impact on one of these goals, they scale incredibly well and influence the other ones. So if you can just find anywhere where your technology makes an impact, that can scale to have a huge difference in the world. And I'm just going to basically show how Partisia Blockchain can be used to attain some advancement on some of these goals. So I'll go through some of our successful use cases real quick, and then I'll continue on to the role of the smart contract in all this. So one area where you can make a difference with the privacy-preserving blockchain is that you can make privacy-preserving advertisement. There's a huge financial incentive to be able to make targeted advertising, but it puts us all in jeopardy of this kind of surveillance economy. And basically what we would like to do is to enable the user to control their own data and also have the financial ownership over their own data. So better internet search is an example of an application of doing exactly that. Then we also have an example of a data exchange in collaboration with instars.com. And another very interesting application is self-sovereign identity. Of course, you can do this in a myriad of ways, but the pilot project was a COVID-19 passport, which basically allowed the user to verify that they were immune or vaccinated without revealing any of their sensitive data. So it would work in such a way that the doctor would photograph the patient after they had received their vaccination, and then verify some authority figure, like for example a policeman or a border guard, would then just take a picture of the person, and then they would just get a positive or negative on the verification. And that way the authority figure would have absolutely access to no private data, because the photograph of the person is just the information they already have. They've already seen their face. So there's actually no loss of private information in that case. Then there are also cases for financial privacy. We have this financial order matching utilizing zero-knowledge computation called Siberian. It's for the Toro platform, and there's a huge market for order matching. Then we also have a cybersecurity application, which basically, when you have cybersecurity breaches, they can be incredibly expensive, but it's very, very hard to reveal if you've been hacked or if your data in your company has been compromised. But for mutual benefit, you would really like to share intelligence on security breaches. But with MPC technology, it's actually possible to share the nature of some of these attacks with sister companies, and then still keep your sensitive company data secret. So there's a huge potential for that. We also have also done projects with humanitarian aid and health. So one of the smart things you can do with NFTs is that you can use them for fundraising. And how this would work is that an artist would donate a piece of art as an NFT, and then people could bid for it, and after that it could be resold and donated again several times, thereby maximizing the profit. And whenever the art piece was resold, the artist would get a small fraction of that. So there was an incentive both for getting great art from for the fundraise, but also a way to really generate huge funds for this good cause. Another big problem in the world is counterfeit medicine. More than 70% of the medicine in sub-Saharan Africa is counterfeit, and millions of people actually die from this problem every year. But in a collaboration with Origin All, we made this project for verifying the authenticity of the medicinal products, which is just of huge potential benefit for millions of people. We are also doing something called the Virtual Public Register, which is confidential health statistics. One of the big challenges when you have some scientific data, for example, let's say cancer research, is that you might not be able to do comparative analysis with other public data you have, or on other sensitive data you have, for example, on people's diet or whatever you can have in another database. But it might be extremely beneficial for both for the public interest and for scientific reasons. You might want to be able to do a comparative analysis, but only the researchers doing these separate projects have access to the data, and they can't compare it. But with secure multi-party computation, it's possible to do data analysis and comparative analysis of these data without the data ever being leaked, because the comparison will happen with secret shared information. So what is the role of the smart contract in solving these types of problems? So the trust in transaction is built on top of institutions that deliver enforcement. And those institutions, they all have inherent weaknesses. The smart contract does not really replace or fix these institutions. That's not really possible. But what you can do is that you can patch some of these institutional weaknesses up, things that relate to, for example, the legal framework, or basically the capacity of the market or the capacity of the state to do enforcement in these different areas. And by doing that, you can create a huge difference. So here's a list of the types of challenges that smart contracts can help to alleviate. So democratic election integrity, for the simple reason that you can, I'll go into this example in more detail, but basically because there's a huge problem that you can not at the same time have privacy and also have a complete transparency of the vote. And that's one of the inherent dilemmas that we have had in democratic elections for many years. So then, as an impartial trustee for transactions, that's almost like the textbook definition of what a smart contract does. But with zero knowledge, this implication goes even further, because you can choose the exact moment of when you release the vital information and what you're going to release. Internet privacy that we went over, corruption. You can create, for example, auctions on government contracts, where you can assure to the public that even though you keep all the bidder information secret, you can actually assure that the conditions of the auctions were actually neutral. For example, if you have a huge military contract or something that is using a lot of taxpayer funds to buy some private service, then you can find out, see the conditions, and even without revealing the sensitive company information, you can still find out that the bid was actually neutral and that no corruption happened. At least you can improve the probability that it was not corrupt. Product safety and brand integrity, that's as the example we mentioned with the authenticity of medicine, but it could basically be any kind of product brand that you can use this technology to verify. Payment infrastructure, a huge difference in places where the native payment infrastructure with their currency, for example, it can be a victim of inflation or lack of banks. There can be lots of problems, but basically with the ability of the blockchain as your payment infrastructure, you can enable lots and lots of people to get access to the market and access to financial transactions very fast. Property ownership, that's the benefit also, of course, of a public blockchain, is that when you own something, it's on a permanent ledger, on a permanent record that can't be changed back in time. So you can see who owns something, and it might seem like it's not a big deal, but in some countries, legal documents are not very secure. So to get something on a permanent record on the internet can be very vital for actually proving that you own something. Equal market access, in the sense that the smart contract does only discriminate to the parameters that are put in the contract. So everybody that fulfill the criteria of a given transaction have equal opportunity to do so. So I'm just going to get a little bit further in because there are lots of challenges that you can address with zero-knowledge smart contracts, but I'm just going to take democracy as an example of how I'm going to solve it, or how we would solve it if you wanted to use a smart contract to do it. So any sort of traditional form of voting has this basically have to balance the transparency of the vote with the privacy of the voter. So the most transparent way of voting could, for example, be a show of hands, and then there's just a problem that there's absolutely everybody can verify the accuracy of the vote count, but everybody's vote and opinion is revealed. And if there is a shady, opportunistic person in power, they might use that to their advantage, and we don't want that. But what basically zero-knowledge voting allows you to do is to get the accuracy and the transparency of basically a show of hands, that everybody can verify that the vote count is correct, but at the same time the identity and the individual votes can be guaranteed to be secret. Thank you very much.